Hey, are you kind of curious about what it's like behind the scenes of a Shark Tank winner? In today's video, I cover entrepreneur Tony Lam. And if you haven't heard of Tony, you got to check him out. He actually comes from humble beginnings when his family actually escaped the Vietnam War and came to America. He was actually sponsored, and then he built a successful career in the corporate setting at Cisco. And he could have stopped there, but he actually escaped by building a Wingstop empire. He owns about 10% of the Wingstops in the Bay Area. And he not only did that, but he also helped launch a business on Shark Tank that was successful, Mavens Creamery. You might have seen it on YouTube. And now he's focused on his newest project, Omni Bev. This one is really dear to his heart. This podcast was actually sponsored by Tony today. So make sure to check out his coffee at Omni Bev. I'll leave the description below, and make sure you use the code HUSTLE for 15% off. He was generous enough to give that as well. And if you never heard of Omni Bev, it's actually a company with a big meaning behind it. It's actually elevating Vietnamese culture through its number one thing, coffee. If you're Asian, we all know how important coffee is to Vietnamese people. It's one of the most delicious things in the world. But he actually created a cold brew as well. So make sure to check that out. And the reason why I had Tony on was for a very good reason, because there's a lot of people listening to this. Maybe you're a student, maybe you're a practicing pharmacist or other sort of professional looking to do something more with your lives, but you don't know where to start. Tony's actually been there, and he walks us step by step about his personal journey. So make sure to follow Tony. I'll leave links below. Support OmniBev. Chances are it's probably good for your refugee hustle. And so make sure to use the code HUSTLE at checkout for that 15% off as well. And also, if you're curious whether OmniBev is any good or not, me and my friend, we do a review. I'll put it in the corners, one of these over here, and make sure to check that out. By the way, quick disclaimer, this video actually came out a little choppy, so never mind that, but listen to the content. I'll leave timestamps below so that you can fast forward to any certain parts that you want to hear. But enjoy. You'll love this podcast as well. Take care. Bye. Yeah, today we have a really special guest. We have Tony Lam. What really caught my eye about Tony is that Tony has spent actually 14 years at a corporate company, Cisco. He actually built a Wingstop empire in the Bay Area. And I think you own about 10% of the Wingstops in the Bay Area too.
That's correct.
Yeah. And you also launched a business, or had one of your businesses on Shark Tank. And now you're focused on Omni Bev, which is focused on elevating Vietnamese culture through obviously the Vietnamese staple of Vietnamese coffee as well. So the amazing part, as I was going through your story as well, is that you weren't given a silver spoon. You actually created it yourself. And a lot of the people watching this, they're going through very similar things. They're students, they're Asian American pharmacists who did all the right things on paper, but they want to do something greater with their lives. And they want to build something good with impact and meaning. And, I thought since you have so much experience and you're doing all these things, you fit within the refugee hustle playbook as well. So I would like to introduce, hey, Tony, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing good, Kevin. Thank you for having me on your show.
No, thank you for coming on. How we met was pretty interesting. I posted up in Asian Hustle Network, and you replied to one of my posts. And we just started off a conversation for years. So I just really want to thank you so much. For the people that don't know you, first, I would love to kind of start hearing your refugee story of how you came to America during the Vietnam War, especially on the Dear Asian American podcast. You shared such a great story. So I would just love to give people a background about your story, Tony.
Sure. So I was born in Vietnam, 3 months old, right before the fall of Saigon.
Yeah.
My father had to make a really difficult decision. He and my mother was, do we stay here or do we go? My grandfather at that time said, hey, I want my grandson. It's going to be a really dangerous journey. I want him to stay here. But my father made the decision to say, you know what? No, we're going to take him with us. And dropped everything. My father was the captain of the Navy in the Southern government of Vietnam. And we were fortunate that, he had a boat where he's basically told all the relatives, whoever wants to go, this is the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And so we had, I don't know the exact count, but at least 20 people from our family side all go on the boat in this journey, very, very dangerous journey. And today, my father, he still has a lot of nightmares about that journey. Once in a while, he'll dream about that and, talk about them not having food and, just, don't know what's going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And, my family is a family of faith. We're Catholics.
Yeah.
And we were very fortunate while we were at the refugee camps in the Philippines. There were the Wingstop charities in the US that basically all the church organizations were saying, hey, there's a bunch of refugees from Vietnam. It would be really great for you guys to consider sponsoring some of these families to help them out. And I was very fortunate that I had an American family that brought us in, brought my parents, an uncle, and my grandmother. Now, again, we had a family of over 20 people that went with us. Now, everyone, not one single family could take all 20. So a lot of my aunts and uncles went to families on the West Coast as well as Michigan. So we were all scattered throughout the U.S. But we all kept in touch, of course. To this day, most of them have moved to California.
Yeah.
And so we're all mostly in the Bay Area as well as Southern California.
Yeah.
So that's my humbling beginnings. I don't have the accent. People are like, oh, wait, you're really me to have the accent. Well, yeah, I was 3 months old. So I went to school, elementary school, middle school, high school, all in the U.S. and I went to college, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and got my business degree there. Yeah.
That's really great. And one thing I would love to kind of start covering is this aspect of not growing up with a silver spoon. So I'm kind of curious, what was it like for you growing up, and who are the people that really influenced you during your childhood, I guess?
I think I have to say I had great parents. Their expectations were, of course, they would have liked me to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? Almost every Asian kid. And I get it. But they allowed me when I told them, I want to go and major in business. And they didn't quite understand what that meant. They, for whatever reason, thought that I was going to work at a bank. I was going to be a teller.
Yeah.
And that to them was, in the business field.
Yeah.
But I said, no, that's not business. There's a lot more to that, right? And so I went to school. My very first job out of college was working at Cisco.
Yeah.
And I remember because my father, the highest degree of education he ever got was AA, okay? Yeah. And in community college, San Jose Community College. Mm-hmm. And as I graduated, he had spent, let's think about this, 22 plus years, right, of his life since I've been born, where I was going to be making more than he made. And at that time, I'll let people know, back in 97, I was making $42,000 and everyone was like, wow, that's a lot of money, back then, right? But I was very fortunate working for Cisco because, it was the start of the internet boom. And I was fortunate in the sense that I had gone through about 5 or 6 stock splits during that time.
Yeah.
And, it was a lot of hard work. You're a kid with all this energy. And if people ask me, would you have done that again, if you were to start all over? And I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
What I learned from corporate was culture, working with cross-functional team. The biggest one was process. Yeah. I noticed that a lot of people that go into entrepreneurships, they don't have the foundation of process, right? And because I went through all of that during my corporate life, I gained that experience. And so I incorporate process in my businesses today.
Yeah.
So it's documentation, training, having a training plan. You need to have all that because turnover, right? Like if we have someone who is helping us, one of our executive admins, for example, they've been with us for 2 years. They have all this knowledge. They would leave a company. And then if you don't have a training plan, you don't have a backup plan, you now spend all this resource and time training another person all over again.
Yeah. And definitely we're going to dive into more about your Cisco life as well. But one thing that was pretty amazing at the time too, as you were talking about opportunities, going to college and all that. Most of these days, a lot of students actually struggle finding one job like out of college, right? But here, I remember hearing your story. You had four different offers. I remember with Deloitte or HP, Cisco, and another company. I can't remember. But I guess like one of the questions I have is like, how did you position yourself to have so many opportunities straight out of college, by the way?
Yeah, I think I'll let all the people know the secret here. I was part of a business organization called ISA, which is my major was business. My concentration was finance and information system.
Yeah.
And at that time, I held a position. What was it called? Relations, something with relations. I forgot what it was. But basically, I was responsible for organizing the speakers.
Yeah.
The speakers from the high-tech companies.
Yeah.
And because of that relationship, I knew them personally. I had their emails and everything. We would go out to lunch together after the meeting. I kept in touch with them. And so I got that opportunity to interview with these speakers. And I increased my odds because of holding a position like that. So join a club and, invite guests from high-tech companies.
Yeah.
And, your net worth is as big as your network, right? And so I tell people, like, you got to network. You just got to network. You network on LinkedIn. That's LinkedIn was not there back then. But I tell you, I would have probably killed it had I had LinkedIn back then. So building that relationship and joining clubs and just networking with people was the key.
During that time when you were networking with these people in high positions, did you ever feel any anxiety, or how was your approach talking to them back in the day? Because you didn't have things like LinkedIn. Was it just like through email? What was your approach, and how did you build that relationship with them?
It was through email. And, one of the things that during my junior year, I tell people, I applied for internships, right? They were very hard back then. I didn't get any.
Yeah.
And it just motivated me even more. I was like, wow, those other kids got internships. I didn't get one single one.
Yeah.
And so it motivates me to, hey, I'm going to improve myself. I'm going to do better. I want to work on projects to give me a better chance of, getting that job. And the communication, to your point, was mainly through email. When I was with the club, it was 1 year where I lined up speakers. Every single week, we had a speaker from a different tech company. Okay.
That's great.
So, and that was my job, was to ensure that we always had a speaker. And the beautiful thing about the speakers that were coming in, I would say about 80% of those speakers were alumni of Cal Poly. Okay. So more than anything else, they wanted to help the students at my particular college. So whatever universities that you guys are going to school at, chances are those speakers are typically alumni of that school. And so, you just got to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it sounds like these alumni, they wanted to help, right? And since you had a position at the school, you're essentially the bridge to help them. Does that sound about right, Tony?
Correct. I was the liaison between the students and the high tech company.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah. Now, at this point, while you're in college and all that, because I know that you always in the other podcast, you're saying that you always wanted to be an entrepreneur. You always want to do something of your own. Was that this point where the seed was planted? Was it before? Was it a little bit later? When essentially did you want to be an entrepreneur, I guess, Tony?
I think during college, I just didn't know what that business was. Was it working in tech? Was it to start a company of my own? And for whatever reason, I landed more in the food space, which was totally unexpected. But I guess I never really told anybody this story. But back in high school, not even college, but back in high school, I guess my very first experience of business was when I was doing fundraising for clubs. And how did I fundraise? Well, we sold candy bars. So every single time I was going to class, I would have a box of candy bars. And I would basically be telling the students, like, hey, the money that's being made from selling these candy bars would go back to the club, which it did. And I was selling a box every 2 days of about 36 candy bars, and we were selling it for 50 cents. And so I started doing the math and everything. I'm like, wow, this is a pretty lucrative business. Just carrying a box of candy bar from one class to another. And kids back then they wanted something sweet. So they would just, I had Skittles, I had Snickers, I had M&Ms. And so they could, it's like that one guy with your cloak, right? You open it up and you have all these watches. I was like that guy with all the different candy bars that they could choose from. And that was, I would have to say, like, that was my very first experience in, getting a taste of business. It inspired me. I was like, I could probably sell this stuff.
Yeah, I love that story because it's so funny. I think that was one of my first experiences doing business as well. Like exact same business model, candy bars, except, inflation with all that. You're older than me, so we're selling it for $1. We actually, believe it or not, we actually put the tennis club out of business, dude, because we're competitive with our prices. So that's really funny.
Wow.
Love that story, by the way. Okay, cool. So at the time you had this idea that you wanted to start a business. You just didn't know how. So did you know that time would eventually come? Did you have faith in that time would come, or did you start planning out options? Like, how did you plan for that future, I guess? Or did you?
I didn't plan. I knew I wanted to do a business in college. It wasn't until when I was working at Cisco, after maybe 4 or 5 years, what happened was we were going through layoffs, especially during the internet bust.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought to myself, I said, wow, they're keeping the younger guys. It's only been 5 years after graduating. They're keeping the younger guys and they're getting rid of the older people. And I said, you know what? One day that's going to be me, right? That's going to be me, right? They're going to want the younger, more energy, cheaper labor, right? And I said, I better come up with another passive income.
Yeah.
Right. I need to figure this thing out. Like, what am I going to do? And so that's when I started to think a little bit more. Like, still, I didn't know what it was going to be. But I think at that point, too, I started to realize, like, wow, I got lucky because they brought us into this one room at Cisco. And the director would come in and said, you guys are safe.
Yeah.
Everybody in this room is not getting laid off. And that was the defining moment where I'm like, wow. So I got lucky here. Now I got lucky for the next 14 years, of course, through this whole process. But yeah, I mean, it was that point that I realized, like, hey, you know what? My time will come. So let's figure things out. I think I stayed a little too long at corporate. I was comfortable. It's great having check by check. You know what exactly you're going to get paid every 2 weeks, right? But I think you're also limiting yourself too.
Yeah.
In the sense that I think entrepreneurs, they have a lot of potential, but there's also risks involved with those opportunities.
Yeah.
But it's how you navigate through it, right? That is going to define who you are.
Yeah, I think it was a lot more than being lucky for 14 years. You probably did a lot of great work, Tony. So props to you on that. I do really want to go back to a part that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned that you had 4 different opportunities, right? So I'd love to kind of hear the process of how did you decide what was the right opportunity? Because sometimes when we're presented so many opportunities, we get stuck. We're just like, man, this is good, but this is good. How did you go about deciding Cisco was for me?
That's a really good question. Oh, wow. Back in 97, nobody knew who Cisco was. Believe it or not, nobody knew. Yeah, everybody wanted to work for HP. At that time, we had what we call the Big Six, and that was Deloitte. And everyone wanted to work at HP because they had all the cool stuff. They got the printers, they got the computers, all the really cool gadgets. And then when people said, "Why are you working at Cisco? What kind of discount can you give me or offer me?" I says, "I can give you a router." Like, what the hell is a router, right? And it was just so interesting. I look back at because all my friends were working for these cool companies and they had some cool gadgets, and all I had was this router. I'm like, what am I going to do with the router? I go, there's this thing called the internet. I remember this clearly because I taught HTML 1.0. Back in the days, there was this thing called Netscape, guys. And it was just unbelievable. I had this workshop where I was teaching people how to write text and put an image on this web page, and they're like, "Wow, that is so cool."
Yeah.
You know, and they said, you know, this is onto something. And so I have to say that the recruiter also did a good job in recruiting me. But when I was trying to figure out what path I was going to go, so was it HP, was it Deloitte, and there was another one that was an IT organization company too. Now I can't remember it because it's been almost 20 plus years. I think my life would have been different if I went the Deloitte route, because I think today now it's called PwC.
I think Deloitte's still around. And
Sorry. Actually, it wasn't.
It was another name. I remember you mentioned.
It was Coopers and Lybrand.
Yeah.
It got acquired by Price Waterhouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, I could have gone through the consulting route, or I could have gone through the tech route, and I chose Cisco because they were saying, hey, this is an upcoming company. They need more talent, and our stock prices is going up. So I did get to see the stock price. You know, I said, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here. And they gave me more stocks than HP did. I remember HP offering me $48,000. So $6,000. It was a pretty big difference back then, you know. But back in 2000, before the .com bust, on paper I was a millionaire.
Yeah,
because of all the splits.
Yeah, you said, in 2 years you're pretty much a millionaire on paper, right? That's crazy.
It was phenomenal. So, I mean, I did a lot of due diligence. When I got to interview the recruiters, I remember, man, I interviewed 9 people at Cisco. And so it just tells you, like, you know, they want to make sure they found the right person. But at the same time, what I liked about Cisco, because, you know, we are college grads, you get to choose, or 6 groups get to choose who they want.
Oh, wow.
So you're coming in. So it wasn't just one department. It was 6 different departments in IT.
Yeah.
Okay, in IT. So they're like, yeah, let's bring them all in. We want an opportunity to interview every single one of them. And then all the managers will get together, I found out later, and they would choose who they want to work in their departments. That's how it worked back then.
Wow. That's pretty cool. So, man, so you ended up ultimately deciding Cisco, even though they don't have the cool printers, you can offer people discount on routers. It ended up working out during the .com boom, right? Yeah. So you stayed there for 14 years. You're working 60, 70 hours per week as well. So I guess one of the first things that I would love to cover is, for the first time, you mentioned this earlier, but you're making double of what your family was making. How was that life for you? How were you feeling at that time?
I was feeling great, Kevin. I mean, I'll tell you this, I moved back to the Bay Area, all right? And I stayed with my parents, and I told my dad, we had a 1,200 square foot home, okay? 1,200 square foot home. And the room that I had was God dang, it was probably maybe 200 to 300 square feet. I mean, it was a very small room. And I told them, I can't live in this small room, Mom and Dad. And so what did I do? Within 2 years, I said, let's go house shopping. Yeah. And went, and we found a house. It was kind of funny because it was right down the street. And they still live there today. It's 2,700. So more than double the house, the current house that we lived in. And I said, Mom, Dad, this is your house. It's not my house. I'll put the money up. This is yours. You know, you've taken care of me all this time. This is the least I can do. Yeah. Now, granted, back then when I bought the house, it was only $330,000. Now it's obviously worth a lot more now. But back then, so I was able to do that and get them a house.
That's so great to be able to be in a position to finally give back to your family after going through everything. Because we didn't mention on this podcast, but your dad had to make a very difficult decision bringing you over to America as well. So that totally changed the course of your life, and being able to give something back. Wow, that's so heartwarming listening to that story as well. But to focus back on Cisco for a second. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier was building up your business foundation skills during that time. You mentioned process and whatnot. So what are some of the other things that you learned that carried over into your other businesses as well, from that time at Cisco? What are some of those essential skills that you learned?
Yeah, just I think the culture, having worked for the number one CEO, number one salesman in the world, the John Chambers, very charismatic CEO. I'm very blessed to have worked for him at Cisco. I got to meet him, shake his hand. He even, I tell people this funny story, but he even gave us a massage. And I'll go through it really quickly. It's kind of funny. So Y2K was a very big thing back then because a lot of the computers systems could not handle, the zero zeros in 2000.
Yeah.
And so we had to work around the clock during this time. And one of the perks for working around the clock was they brought these masseuses because you're going to work all day long. That was one of the perks, right? You're like, wow, yeah. So it's my turn. I'm getting a massage, and I didn't know, but John Chambers was walking down the aisle, thanking everybody for working so hard. And it was just a quick 2 seconds back rub, but good job, Tony, like that. It was really cool. It was like, wow, man, I could tell everyone, like, I got a massage from the CEO of Cisco Systems, so
Yeah.
it was, quite an experience, but just the way he took care of the employees.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you, like, the bonuses that we were getting and just the way he was just so appreciative, acknowledging, like, we aren't here today, without your help, without your support, without you guys working these long hours to support our customers, and so that's one of the reasons why I am so customer focused in all my businesses. My philosophy about the customer is always right was because of working at Cisco.
Yeah.
Okay. I worked in another group at that time. It was called CAPS, CAPS, Critical Accounts Program Services. I think that's what it was called. And these guys were the ones that had to work with the customers where they're like, I'm dropping all Cisco products. You guys, the service that we've been getting, the product that you guys have been giving us has been very faulty. Mm-hmm. So rather than lose those, at stake was millions and millions of dollars of lost revenue. So Cisco would assign this group to come in, and I would be part of that group as the network engineer. So I worked closely to ensure to win that business back, did everything, whatever it took to win that business back. Yeah. And having done so much of that and seeing the culture, like the customer's always right. I mean, it was unbelievable because I was like, man, I can't believe how we're able to turn things around. We were about to lose this major account, but we put this team together to go and win that customer back. And we were successful in doing that.
That must be a thrill. Yeah. You're pretty much a client retention team, it sounds like. Is that right?
Correct.
That's great. And I definitely, as I was listening to that other podcast, I was just really seeing this theme of treating people right, paying it forward. And now I can start seeing like, okay, these influences in your life, especially John Chambers, so that CEO, even giving you a 2-second back rub, right? literally patting you on the back for your efforts, man, it just creates such a memorable experience, right? And so I know that, so that explains why you were there for 14 years, I guess. You're there for a while, but you mentioned that you perhaps stayed there for too long. When did you kind of notice that maybe it was time for change for yourself, Tony?
Mm-hmm. I think I was in a group for 10 years, just very comfortable, making comfortable money in the Bay Area. But I just knew that, collecting this paycheck and not, how do I say it? Not using all this experience and starting my own business was something that was lacking in my life. I felt that it was lacking. And during that time, though, I have to say, I did pick up Wingstop. I'm just trying to put the timeline together. When I was about 31 years old was when I first got involved with Wingstop. So 9 years into Cisco at that time already. And I told myself, once I have the fifth Wingstop, I would seriously consider leaving and just focusing on this business. And so I had already, again, I was on the 9th year already when I started it. But I made the decision to, focus more on the business and look at other opportunities after 14 years. But it was probably around the 9-10 year mark that I said that it's let's start looking at something else too. But yeah, I mean, Wingstop is a different story. But I basically had something to fall back on.
Yeah.
So you guys over there, make sure you save enough money. Don't just quit and jump into the entrepreneurship without having savings, saved up. I'll go into that a little later on why that's really important.
Yeah, the 18th month runway and all that you always preach as well. So we'll definitely cover that as well. Before like when you realize that time to transition, right? After making comfortable decisions, after about 10 years, you're thinking about picking up Wingstop, right? I guess what were some of the other options that you're looking at? Because typically, I'm pretty sure that your first inclination was like, let's do Wingstop right away. Were you looking at anything else, I guess, within that time frame?
I did consider looking at other companies Facebook and Google were a couple of other companies that I wanted to potentially work at, have a different scenery. That didn't happen. The other thing that was coming up during that time was iOS came out in 2007. And a partner of mine said, hey, iOS came out in 2007. Now, a couple of years later, they were looking for developers to create apps. And I said, oh, that's pretty interesting. I would love to create an app on a mobile device. The thing that spurred me the most with mobility was when I had the Trio back then, the BlackBerry Trio. I was like, wow, this is really cool having internet on your phone, right? Now everybody has the iPhone, but back then, guys, there was no internet. And I was like, this is just truly remarkable.
Yeah.
One day you can do trading on your phone. You can look up data. This is going to be the next hottest thing.
Yeah.
So I went through this whole thing. A lot of the people that are probably going to listen to your show said, what? You guys didn't have that back then? You didn't have that back then? No, I didn't.
That's crazy.
Yeah, right? So, but that spurred some interest, for me too. It also set the foundation to go into enterprise mobility apps. We can talk about that later. But so that was an area that I was also highly interested. And back in 2000, gosh, I can't remember. It's kind of a blur now. I did have a photography company too.
Wow.
And that also gave me some experience. Not too many people know this, but I used to be a wedding videographer.
What? That's so crazy.
Yeah, I don't tell people that because kind of embarrassed about it is because of some of the things that I did it for 6 years.
Wow.
And it was kind of funny that we had almost a customer every 2-3 weeks. And it was my partner and I, George, love George. We called it geotone photo. So the way people ask, how did you get that name?
Yeah.
I would tell them George, GEO, and then TON was Tony. So geotone photo came out, and it was, I have to say that was one of the defining moments for me for business too. Why? Because at that time, the typical camera was about 4 megapixel. No joke. And people said, you're going to take my wedding with digital cameras? And the average megapixel was 4. We had about a 10 and a 12 megapixel camera.
Wow. Okay.
We spent at that time $6,000 to get that. And we showed them the digital album and everything. And they're like, wow, this is really impressive. And so I had to convince people to go from film to digital back then. And at first, a lot of skepticism because they're like, oh, the skin color is not as nice as it is with film. And when all the other photographers I talked to back then, they're like, digital will never, ever overtake film. And I was, no joke. And I was like, wow, really? Do you honestly? But we had the high-end camera. And, our pitch was, guys, with these digital cameras, we could make these, 3x4, 36x24 photos. And it's not even pixelated because of the cameras that we had back then.
Yeah.
And I was the one that wasn't taking the best photo. My partner was the one, George. He was the one that was the true photographer. Yeah. I was more the sales guy.
Yeah.
Convincing people to like, hey, you should use us versus the traditional photographers. And learned quite a bit from that, I have to say.
One of the things I love about that story is like, as I'm listening to everything, you're building so many adjacent skill sets, right? So during the Cisco time, you're learning processes, right? During your videography, you're learning not only a bit of wedding photography, you're learning how to composition, right? You're learning sales. I love all these things because I have I have like a good picture of where everything is, but I hope as people are listening to this, you can hear and see the buildup of Tony's empire, I guess, right? So
it's the story, the journey, Kevin. I take everything in life that every time I meet someone or I work on something, it's a storytelling, it's an experience you're going to get. It might open doors, it might not open doors, and so that's how when I am walking on this earth, whoever I meet and I can help, that's great. If I can share that knowledge, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. Now, I do want to go back to something that you said earlier, Tony, as well. You mentioned that leaving, right? So you're planning your exit strategy. I don't know how you came up with 5 Wingstops, like that specific number or anything like that. But I love to kind of hear, like, what was your game plan for leaving the 9 to 5, and what are some of the factors that you're considering during that time in terms of creating that roadmap for yourself?
Yeah. So when I was leaving, Wingstop was generating enough at that time, enough income for me to focus on entirely. At that time, you cannot, when people ask me, so why didn't you leave Cisco and open the first store? That one store, I have 3 other partners, by the way. That one store alone is not going to replace your salary. Until you have, 5 stores, then you're making serious money to be able to fall back on.
Yeah.
Right. And when I felt that was the time to do it, that was one of the reasons why I did it. And then right during that time as well, I just have this itch sometimes where it's like, I can't sit still, as you could probably tell right now. One of my other partners, Mimi, at that time said, Tony, I got this great idea with mobile apps.
Yeah.
I said, okay. She says, this is around 2011. So once I quit Cisco, I took a little break and then I joined her and started this other company called Chimp. And it was an app that we wanted to be the one-stop shop for service providers. So when I say service provider, to book with service providers. A service provider is a dentist, a doctor's office, kids activity, restaurant. So we want everybody to go to our website. Do you need a doctor? Okay, here you go. Put your current address in. You would have a listing of all the different doctors.
Service-based businesses, kind of like almost like how we use Yelp today in 2020, I guess, right?
Exactly. So here's the thing. This is why I love telling people this story, because it opened the doors for me for other things. But you're right. It's Yelp, but we were thinking about this. And 1.5 years, we found out that we ran out of money, basically, at the end of the day. We invested about $250,000 into this app. So it was very, very risky. So we hired an Indian team to develop this. We didn't have any more money to put into it. So we shut everything down. But through that whole experience, having to go to doctor's office, dentists, and convince them to try to use our app, we had a chicken and egg problem. Okay, the doctors would say, how many users do you have? 50? 50. That's not enough. And then we go to the users. Well, how many? I don't see my doctor. I don't see my dentist on this. Why would I even use this? So there was a chicken and an egg problem that we had. We had this great booking button. Okay, this is back in 2011, right when apps were coming out. And so what ended up happening was the company that developed our app hired me to run their program management. And so for the next 5 years, I worked for them. I worked at Intel, Gilead Science, Microsoft as a contractor for that company, building mobility apps. Got all that experience. And then what happened? Then I got all these guys that were building apps that wanted to get into restaurants. And they said, hey, Tony, I got this loyalty program. Hey, Tony, I got this thing that could take your orders over the phone, and they're like, and I said, before I spend a lot of my time and resource on it, I want to have a board position or something. And they said, okay, sure. Why not? So all the mistakes that I had gone through, I paid a tuition, so to speak. I don't think, yes, it was a big loss of $250,000.
Yeah.
But now I sit on the board for 5 different tech app companies focused on hospitality. So, one thing that people would say, well, that was a failure. No, it actually opened the door for me.
Yeah.
To get into these other tech companies. And and they're all doing great right now. We just, a couple of them, 3 of them have gone through Series A.
Oh, wow.
The ones that I'm sitting on. So, that's why I tell people, like, don't ever think failure as a negative thing. Just think of it as a learning, a paid tuition, because it's going to open the door for you later on.
Also, like, as you're talking to these businesses, I can imagine you're learning like the lingo, or you're learning how to effectively communicate with these different businesses in different industries, especially you mentioned restaurants, right? And it's just like, man, you ended up a lot in the food industry as well. So yeah, that's great. Now, I do want to transition over to the next stage of your life. So you left Cisco, you're diving into Wingstop right now. A lot of people in your position will probably go down the route of building something their own rather than go through a franchise. So you obviously chose a different route. So what are some of the factors that made you choose a franchise like Wingstop versus other options, I guess?
Yeah, I think with Wingstop, when I was doing my due diligence, having a support team is really critical, because someone like me, never being in the food business, never really having a knowledge in that industry, I need all the help that I can get. And so what you're getting when you're signing up with a franchise is you're getting the expertise to come and help you. So there are 2 positions at Wingstop that I had access to 24/7. One was what we called a FBC, Field Business Consultant. They would come in, they would analyze the business. They said, does your employees need training? Do you need some advice? They were the liaison, so to speak, between corporate and the franchisee. So always had that. That's where my royalty went to, right? The second one was a field marketing manager. Yeah. So how do we get the brand awareness out? What kind of marketing can we do?
Yeah.
What I do is I just give them, this is my budget. Here's $10,000. What can you do best with this $10,000? Yeah. So they'll look at the surrounding areas. They'll look at the businesses, the schools, the religious organizations. Maybe it's digital marketing. And they put the whole plan together for me.
Yeah. So they lay out a roadmap for you, a plan of action.
They lay out, correct. So when that's one thing. And then down the road, at that time, I didn't know about co-ops, marketing co-ops. Yeah. But now I tell people, guys, the marketing co-ops are very important. And that is a marketing co-op, by the way, guys, is basically, it's a region that my corporate has defined as part of a DMA, demographic region, where everybody in this circle contributes marketing dollars into this co-op. So now there's 50 stores in my co-op.
Yeah.
So all of us contribute a certain percentage into this bucket. And so now I have this bucket or this budget of over $1 million, where we're leveraging, if you were in individual stores, for you to buy a radio ad would cost you $10,000, and you wouldn't get the best spots. But because collectively everyone is putting money into it, now we can spend, with this $1 million, then maybe 40,000 and get the prime time slots.
Yeah.
With this radio.
Because I remember you mentioning, like, they were offering like 2 a.m., midnight, and like some random other time.
Yeah,
right?
10 p.m., 2 a.m., 5 a.m. I'm like, wait, my customers aren't listening to the radio at this time, right? And so this is what you're getting. So people are always coming back with, Tony, it's the franchise, they charge so much, they want this royalty and they want this, and that eats into our margin. And so you're buying into the brand.
Yeah.
Right? You're buying into the brand. You have all these stores now assisting you. Yeah. Sure, if you said, I'm too cheap, I don't want to pay the royalty, then you're one individual store. You're going to be that where I was, where the only thing you could afford is that 10 p.m., 2 a.m., 5 a.m. radio, because you only have that budget for one store.
Yeah. I love that. It's kind of like that abundance mentality. I mean, people always assume like a fixed pie, but you can always grow that pie as well. So I love that. And so speaking about this co-op, marketing co-op as well, right? Are you currently the head of that as well? Is that right?
Yes, I am. I'm currently the
So,
head of that right now.
so I love to kind of hear like, how did you position yourself for that? And how's it like controlling $1.5 million budget for marketing and ads, by the way?
Yeah. So I have an agency that I work with,
Yeah.
and so they're the experts, but I get to throw ideas. I get to hear what their ideas are, and I've been doing this for 8 years now.
Mhm.
We've kind of planned the entire budget for the year, so it's not like I'm having to go into a meeting with them every single month. I
Mhm.
maybe speak to them an hour a month, but the biggest meeting would be the one that we plan for the full year. So
Mhm.
once the full year is planned out, everything's on autopilot, so to speak. We just
Yeah.
measure each one of these campaigns to see the effectiveness of that, right?
Yeah.
Now, these campaigns, there's no way I would have been able to afford these campaigns with one store's budget or even 5 store budgets. But
Yeah.
each of these campaigns that we do, range in 6-digit figures to
Yeah.
do. And so you get to learn from that,
Yeah.
right? Like I tried that campaign, and it didn't work. Now we'll never ever do that one ever again.
Yeah.
So in the last 8 years, I've been able to experience every single type of campaign that, we've been able to do or that's out there and see the effectiveness of it. You
That's
don't
great.
know if it's going to work or not unless you try it, right? Now that we try it, I now know if it was a success or
Mhm.
failure. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing with marketing that a lot of people don't know. It's like, it's almost like a science experiment and you're testing different things, right? So I guess in terms of marketing, right, what were some of the most successful campaigns? What were some of the most least successful campaigns? And what do you think contributed to success or failure to each of those campaigns as well? Like the
Mhm.
most memorable ones.
Yeah, I tell you, I had several successful ones. I mean, a lot of successful ones. One of them being the Warriors was one. So we're the official wings of the Golden State Warriors. So a lot of people ask, like, is sports sponsorship really, really worth it, right? And I have to tell them it depends on what you do with it. Okay. And so I educate people, like, for example, what we did was with the Warriors sponsorship, we're able to use the logos and the rights
Yeah.
of the logos of the Warriors. So being able to associate yourself with a winning basketball team
Yeah.
carries a lot of weight too, And so when people see that on the bags, when they see that in the emails, now just imagine like for every Warriors game, we have the ability to send emails out and say, hey, before the game, pick up Wingstop
Yeah.
before the Warrior game, and then you have our logo with their logo and it's custom. Now, we could do that because we pay for the sponsorship. I understand mom, pa's, they're doing that today. Why do I still need a sponsor? Like, when you get big, then they'll come after you.
Yeah.
So, you just can't do that, just because you want to. So
Yeah.
we're doing everything the legal way. And
Mm.
when we're on the radio, for example, we have 20 mentions on every single broadcast
Yeah.
presented by Wingstop, the official wings of the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
That repetitiveness, when you're listening to the game, it's all psychological, right? The more times people hear you, eventually they're like, okay, you know what? I got a craving for Wingstop, or I got to try these guys out,
Yeah.
right? So it works.
Yeah.
And our sales have gone up significantly because of that partnership with the Golden State Warriors.
Wow.
And so that's one. Another one I would say is digital marketing.
Yeah.
During this pandemic, our sales grew by over 30%. People are like, wow, how the heck did you guys like grow sales so significantly, when everybody else is shutting down? Well, a couple things. You just have to know how to pivot. That's one thing. If you're a mom and pop, my advice for them is you guys have to pivot. You have to use delivery services. You got to let people know that you're open, right? And how do you do that? Well, everyone's shelter in place. And people are at home. They're mindlessly going through their social media
Yeah.
all day long. And then they see now a Wingstop ad that wings look so delicious. it's right now 12 o'clock or it's right now 5 o'clock. Okay, I click on this button and, within 3-4 clicks, I'm able to place an order.
Yeah. It's amazing about what the digital market has done, because no longer are we broadcasting a message at times that no one is listening, right? But we're catching them when we have their attention. So that's great. Now, so this is the other core pillar that you've kind of built through this marketing co-op, is the marketing aspects. So you built sales, you kind of built the media aspect, you kind of built all these different skills, and now you built the marketing aspect as well through Wingstop. I love that. Now, I got to ask, man, because probably people are very curious about this, because right on your LinkedIn, it says a Shark Tank winner as well, right? So how does one go from wings to ice cream macarons, by the way? So I'd love to kind of hear the story between Mavens Creamery and the story of you meeting Gwen and Christina as well.
Yeah, so one of my friends, a mutual friend of ours, introduced me to this macaron ice cream sandwiches. He said, "Hey, Tony, I go into the shop. I've been working with, they know, he knows Gwen and Christine, sisters that are making it from home.
Yeah.
And they would bring it to my shop, and within 4 hours, we sold out all 400.
Wow.
Like, interesting. This is really, really interesting. So I come down, I tasted it, and I said, wow, I really enjoy this product. Can you introduce me to them? Because I really want to figure out, like, maybe there's a business opportunity with this. And so met with them, said, what is it that you guys need? And they said, well, we need investment money. And we also need to get a person to help us get our freezer into more restaurants, cafes, right? Now they said that, wow, you're in Wingstop, you got 5 Wingstop, your network in the restaurant industry is bigger than ours. So I said, at that time, yes, it was, but a lot of it was kind of like cold calling. So I said, okay, I would like to, help you make an investment. And so I brought in a cousin of mine in as well. And so it was 4 of us.
Yeah.
And so I remember, I'll tell this story anyways, I should be filtering it, but
it's okay.
We started in the garage, and we're signing up 10 restaurants and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, this is happening. Wow. And people are loving our product and everything. So then we get to a point where this one mall, I can't mention the name of the mall. Yeah. This one mall says, we would love to carry your product here for Black Friday. So we're like, okay, that's kind of cool. Just for 6 weeks, let's just play, let's try this out. Yeah. So we go down there, and we're selling almost 300-400 a day over there too.
Wow.
And it was phenomenal. We're like, this is really, really good, guys.
Yeah.
And then the health department comes along and says, hey, I'd like to see your health permit. Of course, we were getting our building facility. We were still making it at home.
Yeah.
And of course, we're like, oh shoot, we're gonna get in trouble. So we packed everything up, and we told the landlord, like, hey, you know what? You already collected our money. We have other stuff we have other things to take care of. We can't continue on.
Yeah.
And but the health department had our numbers and everything, and they said, you're not allowed to sell to the public without a valid health permit. And so all those restaurants that you have, you need to remove those freezers. And it was a pretty, I want to tell people this because, so that they could relate to it and not do the stupid stuff that we did. But that was the lowest point in our lives, going through that experience, having to tell the restaurant that, hey, I need to remove the freezer now. They're like, wait, what's going on? Right. And I said, to the sisters, this is a learning experience. We learn from it. This is rock bottom. And it's only from this point on, we'll be able to move up, from here on out. So I said, so let's just work on this. So we did everything. We got the construction. We're now in this big facility now. Yeah. Now, this was probably, we were 6 months away from having the facility, but we wanted to, the thing is this, right? The thing is, you want to continue to get sales, because when you move in now, you have the capacity to meet that. If we just, stood still, and just wait for the facility to open up, we're not meeting the demand right away.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why we did what we did. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're now, we're now in 300 different locations. Gwen says to me one day, "Hey, Tony, my boyfriend told me that Shark Tank is going to be at CES. I would like to go and pitch for it." And,
Yeah.
I kind of like said, "Well, we have an investor meeting, that same day. I think that's more important." Okay, but her and her sister wanted to do the pitch. And I said, "Okay, go ahead, go for it. But do you honestly believe that the Shark Tank guys are actually going to invest in our company?"
Yeah.
So I'm not going to lie, I was one of the doubters. But, I tell people about luck and timing, because when they get to Vegas, they get in line, they get their bracelet, you get 60 seconds to pitch. 30 seconds into it, one of the judges, not the Shark Tank judges, but one of the crew cast judges, says, "Wait a minute. Wait, you guys are the ones that made this product, or the founders?" He says, "Yeah. Like, you know what? I live in a city called Morgan Hill. Morgan Hill is 20 miles south of San Jose."
Yeah.
He says, "Are you not in the Safeway that in Morgan Hill?" I go, "Yep, we are." They're like, "Yes, we are." He says, "You know what? I've actually gone there. I've tasted your product. It's absolutely delicious." And so,
what are the chances of that, Tony? Like, that's
that's what I'm saying, right? So what are the chances of that happening? So we make it past that round. We go all the way to the end of the show. We make it to the show. I'm leaving a lot of details. There's a lot more to it, but but we make it to the show. We strike a deal with Barbara Corcoran.
Yeah.
Our phones are going off the hook. We're getting all these emails. Everyone wants to carry our product. I mean, it's a true fairy tale story, starting from a 400 square foot garage to striking a deal on Shark Tank. And, I have that title because, now I'm getting a lot of leads by having that title.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. LinkedIn, I told people, is one of the best lead gen tools out there. And I don't even write, sometimes I don't even need to write a personal note when I'm trying to connect with someone. Yeah. They see that and they're like, "Oh, I want to connect with this person."
Yeah.
So, I definitely, now I have to say that the company is still there. Business is still good and everything. One of the things I was hoping for was that we would get acquired. It didn't happen. And so I had to tell my wife that, our retirement plans are a little bit postponed now until the next biggest thing. But yeah, that's the story. That's the story with Mavens. But just learned a lot from that whole thing, and it's propelled me for the next project that we're going to talk about, coffee. But from that experience, that 5 years so far that I've been involved has gotten me to where I am today.
Yeah, and there were so many setbacks during that story, because even on the previous podcast, you're mentioning that like Whole Foods, they loved it, but then you had to go through a rebrand and then change it to the first all natural macaron ice cream sandwich and stuff. But I'm kind of curious, during that whole looking back, right, in terms of getting Barbara, one of the sharks, to bite, what do you think the deciding factor was, like during their pitch or during the whole presentation? What do you think were deciding factors of getting her to bite on it?
Definitely the story and how she could relate to the entrepreneurs who got started, hearing, and, my family, but they were born in the US, Christine and Gwen, but her father went through the same process as my parents, which was, we were on the boat and working, 2 jobs to support the family. Yeah. And so she could relate to that. And because of that connection, because of her, open heart, she said, I want to invest in this company because of the story, right? Because of what you guys have been through. And so, one thing that I tell entrepreneurs at the end of the day, make sure you document your journey, take photos. You're lucky now that there's Facebook, because you can go through your timeline, so to speak, to see your whole story, right? And so it's just really, really critical for you to document it. And also, when you get to those milestones, take a minute to kind of like think back and be proud of where you came from, right? The hard work, the sweat that you put into there, so, I'm just fist pumping right now with my coffee. Like every single one of these milestones that we're hitting, it's just like, wow, it's just incredible where Tammy came from, where I came from, where the team has come from, but we're documenting the whole thing. And when we're talking to investors or other people, we're sharing that story, and they can, it's you telling that story that resonates with them, and that's what they're buying into. Yeah, you got a great product, but tell me more about the story. Like, what inspired you to, produce this product?
Yeah. And speaking about stories, compelling stories, let's go on to your baby. Let's talk about OmniBev, right? So this is your latest project, right? And I'm sure it's kind of a nice, it seems like a nice, there we go. There's OmniBev. Yeah. And it seems like a nice wrap up of like all these skills that you were building, all the sales, the marketing, everything that we were talking about. Now it's like being poured into this project where you're not only paying homage to Vietnam, right? The locals in Vietnam, but also Vietnamese culture in the US. Yeah. So let's just to get everybody on the same page for the audience, what is OmniBev? Kind of tell us the vision of that.
So Omni Bev was founded by my partner, Tammy Huynh. 3 years ago, she went back to Vietnam on a trip, and she visited one of her uncles in Dalat, Vietnam. And at that time, she did not know that he had one of the largest coffee bean plantation in the whole country. And so he said to her, I have all this coffee bean, but I haven't been able to penetrate the US market. He's more well known in European countries where he's able to sell, tons and tons of coffee beans, but hasn't really made a dent in the US market as much. And so what can you do with this, Tammy? Right? And so Tammy said, okay, let me go back. Let me figure out what I can do. And sorry, my son.
It's all good.
So she goes back, and she's just, man, I tell you, she's just a smart person. So she comes back and she formulates, and she says, you know what? I'm going to put Vietnamese coffee inside a bottle. Okay. Now people don't know that Vietnam is now the second largest exporter and producer of coffee beans. And, she
I think us Asians know that. Like
exactly.
Know that Vietnamese people don't play with the coffee. They're experts at that. But continue what you're saying, Tony.
And she took, I tell you, she took offense to that. She said, I'm going to put Vietnam on the map, with our Vietnamese coffee. And so she made it a mission to do that. Yeah. So she formulated, she says, I'm going to be the first one to put Vietnamese coffee inside a bottle, and it's going to be ready to drink, meaning you'll be able to put it in a refrigerator and grab and go. You're not going to have to, use the fin and go through that process. So, I mean, yes, there's people will, I've had people come and say, this is not the real Vietnamese coffee, Tony, because you're not really using the fin and the drip coffee and everything. But we're looking at the masses, right? At the end of the day. And so she formulated her formulation with nitro coffee.
Two of the craziest hits right now, cold brew and nitro. That's huge.
So she did that one, and then at that time it was the condensed Vietnamese coffee, condensed milk.
Yeah.
And a friend of ours introduced me to her and said, Tony, please speak with Tammy. She's trying to bring Vietnamese coffee mainstream. She's been in the beauty industry, CEO of Luxy Beauty, very big brush company that she's founded, and said, hey, can you help her out? Because you're in the food space. And so I said, okay. And, we sat down, clearly remember it's been like only 15 months, but sat down, had lunch with her, and she was telling me about her mission with Vietnam and what she wants to do with Vietnamese coffee, giving back to the Vietnamese people, the farmers. And I said, wow, I'm now 44 at that point. And I said, if I'm going to work on a project, it better be worth it. Like in the sense that I want to give back to the community, to the people of Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so we shared that same vision. And the other thing was, she's a great recruiter because she basically said, Tony, the average coffee drinker drinks 2 cups of coffee a day. Right. And so do the math. Okay. Our bottle will sell for $4. Just use conservative numbers, 300 days a year, $4, $1,200 per person. And, my coffee is a shit, meaning it tastes great. So I know that they're going to, buy this from us. Okay. And she convinced me. She convinced me to be her partner. And so we've been growing the business ever since. And so, I got into 300 stores at Mavens, and now here we are again. I need to try to get this into more locations to build the store, to build the sales. Because that's key. You got to build the sales. So the very first thing that we got was a pop-up at Facebook.
Yeah.
And we got an intro into Facebook. We serve Facebook, all the employees, the coffee. We get like 60 positive responses. Typically, a vendor only gets 15 to 20. We got 60, 3 times the upper end. So Facebook comes back and says, all the employees are saying they love your product. So let's figure out how to get you in. We have, 200 micro kitchens. So Facebook, as you know, they pay for the employees' food and bev.
Yeah, my friend raves about it all the time.
Exactly, right? So imagine I'm not having to sell this anymore, right? And 2 weeks later, we have this meeting. 2 weeks later, Gavin Newsom says, shelter in place. I'm like, oh no, this would have been the #1 account. I'm like, it's a setback. Listen, come back in 3 months. Things will maybe improve. We still want your product, but come back in 3 months. And, let's talk then. As you know, right now, Facebook employees aren't coming back until maybe next year at this point.
Yeah.
So we had to pivot. And we said, okay, we got to pivot, guys, and come up with other ways.
Yeah.
Now, during this time, too, everything was happening all within March. We had planned for the biggest food expo on the West Coast, Natural Product West. And as we were driving everything down to LA, we get the email. It's been canceled. Right? And you're like, gosh, and I talk about, I tell people about luck and timing, right? This is just bad timing and bad luck. But then again, we're not the only one, right? I know so many people in the same boat. And so what do you do? How do you pivot from this, right? So since we had 1 week to do stuff in LA, since the show was canceled, I jump on AHN. I meet with all these guys that I've been talking to.
Yeah.
And I just meet up with them, have a nice conversation, and giving them our product. And now they're helping promote my product all over Asian Hustle Network right now.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? This is beautiful. We can work together. We help one another out. I was able to sell. We did a small batch of about 4,000 bottles. We promoted on online and everything through AHN, and we sold the 4,000 bottles in 3 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, in about 4 weeks time period. So I'm like, okay, this is working out. And we do another run, and we sell out in 2 weeks. And so now Tammy goes to me and says, Tammy goes, Tony, okay, now that you're selling batches of 4, we're going to do 100,000 bottles. Do you think you could sell that many? 100,000 bottles.
That's a huge scale up. I love it.
That's a huge scale up. And so before I talk about the 100,000 bottles, we were able to get 50 restaurants, even during this pandemic, to carry our product.
Wow.
Okay, just like that. We were able to, we signed up 100 convenience stores. So you're going to be seeing us in the 7-Elevens, the Circle K's, 76 gas station, Valero, Shell, AM/PM as well. Okay, They're going to be carrying this. And even though this pandemic happened, we got together and says, what are we going to do? How are we going to get our products to these locations when, one, we're not allowed to do sampling?
Yeah.
Costco wants us right now, but the question is, you only get one shot with Costco. And if you're not able to do sampling, you're going to be sitting on the shelf. Even though your product tastes great, people don't know about you. If they see Starbucks Frappuccino and they see Omni Bev, they recognize Starbucks.
Brand awareness.
Brand awareness. Yeah. But if I know for a fact that if I let you taste this, I know for a fact you will love it and you will be a fan of Omni Bev. But how do I get, people to try our product when we can't do sampling? So I tell people today, influential marketing, right?
Yeah.
There are these social media influencers that you give them the free product, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them are they hear our story and everything. They just want free product. They have 100,000 to 1,000,000. When they drink it and they say, "Wow, this is the best cold brew," guess what? Everyone else
Everyone else.
clicks on it, wants to order it. That's
Yeah.
how you get by sampling.
That's great. Yeah, and one thing I love about your story so far, there's been a lot of setbacks in your life, right? That Facebook thing, that was a huge excitement, but unfortunately, it didn't go the way that you wanted to. Same with that food festival. I guess like when you're faced with this adversity or these moments of tough times, I mean, what goes through your head? How do you like get through that emotionally? Because a lot of people would just be like, oh shit, like, dude, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, it's the end of the world. But you have this really great, you can just tell by the way that you talk about these stories and the way that you think is very different. You're able to look at the positivity in it. So I'm kind of curious, what's the process that goes in your head while you're going through these adversities in your business?
I guess I just have this attitude of not giving up, do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Right. I think that because of the experience I have, that comes along with it. But it's definitely not easy, because the beautiful thing is you have to be able to pivot. That's one of the biggest things that some people in business today, like, they're so narrow-minded where they're like, no, I know exactly. I don't want to hear what's, from other people, what they think. And what I do is I analytically take feedback from different people, and I'm surrounded by successful as well as very positive people. And Tammy and I will say, "Hey, look at this, guys. Here are 3-4 options that we can take right now. Which one should we focus on? Which one should we try right now?" Right? Because there was three revenue streams for our company. It was B2B, which is the cafes, the corporate offices, right? Hospitals, that's one. When we had the D2C, e-commerce, and then we had the retail, right? And so which one do we want to focus on, and which one can we really put energy and time on? And so we laid everything out. We spoke about it, and we said, hey, you know what? We can do the D2C, and that's what we did, and we were successful on that. So what's the very next step, right? Is let's look at the convenience stores. We had a contact that through an introduction said that they have access to 300 convenience stores. Yeah. And we said, hey, let's look at that too. We were looking at more for retailers like the grocery chains, but let's try the convenience stores during this pandemic, because we have no idea how long this is going to be, but we need to do something. Yeah. And I hope to have a successful story, because right now we're still going through the pandemic. There's no vaccine yet, right? But I hope to be able to tell a good ending story in a couple of years, because we try to get into 10,000 grocery stores is my goal right now. Yeah, I remember you mentioning that within the next 5 years you want to get into 10,000 store locations. But it sounds like you're doing super, super well at the moment. You're able to pivot. You're able to take these adversities and stuff and turn them into positive things as well. I know one of the major things that you mentioned on the previous podcast too is that one of your biggest challenges right now is growing the business and scaling, and how to find the right talent too. So I know you've had all these different businesses, right? So what is your process of finding the right people? How do you know when to first of all, when to hire, and when do you do it by yourself and all that as well? What's your decision-making process, Tony? Mm-hmm. I think there's 4 positions I would definitely look at. One being the CEO, which is Tammy. I'm doing the marketing and the sales right now. We have a COO, and then we have a part-time, what we call fractional CFO right now. But you do need those 4 people in an organization. Looking back, if you don't have the funds, then yes, you're going to have to wear multiple hats. But you do need to have those 4 people to hire. Now, we're still in startup mode.
Yeah.
We're going through fundraising right now. And so we want to be able to bring on more talent, to this. For me personally right now,
Mhm.
I probably have like 400 or 500 leads right now for getting into grocery stores or restaurants. And I can't do it by myself. And so that's why I need money or resources, I should say, to go and answer and meet with these guys and talk to these leads and close these leads, right? I think that you get to a point where you have to be efficient with your time. Now, I'm still doing it today in a bit because, again, you want to tell the story. I was doing the delivery for the cases of coffee.
Oh my God.
And I tell people, but that's part of the journey. That's part of your DNA. And so I put a post. I said, anybody that buys 4 cases of my coffee, I will personally deliver it to you. Yeah. So I went all the way up to Napa, all the way down to Gilroy, all the way as far as Livermore is the area that I was willing to do the deliveries.
Yeah.
And you do the delivery, you take a photo with them. Again, you're building the story, you have a portfolio. Look at all these people wanting Omni Bev.
Yeah. Building up the testimonials, raving reviews and stuff as well. Okay. That's great. Yeah. There's a lot more questions I have, and I know we've gone over time quite a bit, but what I wanted to ask you, like one final question is like, hey, do you have any advice to younger Tony Lambs out there, to other fellow refugee hustlers out there? Is there anything that you know now that you would love to share to them as well?
Yeah, I think my number one advice is before you go into entrepreneurship, just have enough money saved up. Yeah. Because you don't want to, and I tell people, have enough, about 18 months of runway. Meaning that you could take care of yourself, and if you have family, you could take care of your family. Because if you think that you're going to be successful within 6 months, and you're now in the 5th month and you still don't have sales, you're going to be stressing quite a bit. The other thing too is just surround yourself by positive people and mentors. Yeah, there's a lot of mentors out there that are willing to pay it forward, willing to help you out. You just need to find them, and don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing that they can say is, I don't have time or I can't do it. That's the worst thing. But always have an open mind and just have that attitude of, one, customer's always right, and never give up. Those are the advice I would give starting an entrepreneur.
Wow. Yeah. I love it. Oh yeah. And the most important question, Tony, where can one get the Omni Bev drinks at the moment?
Yeah, you can find us, real simple website, omnibev.com, OMNIBEV.com. Yep. And we'll give you discount, I'll share it with you a little later, Kevin. Yeah. But for all those guys interested in our cold brew, we would love for you to give us a try and taste us out.
Let's do it. Yeah. So there'll be I'll link it below for people listening as well. We'll have a code and all that as well. But hey, Tony, I just really want to thank you for just paying it forward to the next generation over here. We definitely went over, but I just felt there was so much great stuff in your story, and I know will benefit for generations to come as well. And so make sure to support Tony and Omni Bev. You're not only supporting your daily hustle of your caffeine, right? But also you're supporting all of us Asians as well by really bringing Vietnamese culture and coffee into the community as well. So that's really great. Thank you so much, Tony. And like I said, I'll leave all your links below so that you can follow Tony as well. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Kevin.